Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. In the studio today, baby. Yeah. In the studio. With me, as always, is the man himself. The man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Moore.
Glad to be here. Glad to have you in the studio. I think it's been like 3 years since we actually recorded a podcast with you in the studio because you're in Dallas. And so here we are, non-virtual, in person. So that means this is going to be a dynamic podcast because the energy is flowing in the room.
Homework for the audience. If you can send in to Matthew@towerleadership.com, if you can send in the date of the last time that I was in the studio, we'll send you something in the mail, something special. This was just off the cuff. I was like, you know what? Go scrub the YouTube page, figure out why I was in that corner and Eric was over here, and then I will send you something. Could be a book, could be an envelope full of something nice. I don't know, but I'm just quick started that. That's what we do here. We quick start things on the podcast. I'm back and I'm ready for vengeance, baby. I'm back in the studio. I'm excited to be here. Welcome back to 2024. Like, we're here. I'll say welcome back because it shouldn't be treated as a new year. You keep your foot on the gas, baby.
Always. Trailing 12. Got to keep going.
I like it. I know we were talking earlier, as you guys know, most of you that are new to the podcast, new year, new podcast, we don't come in here scripted. I mean, ultimately, right before we jump on, Eric and I say, ultimately, what do we want to talk about? What's relevant to talk about? And then we kind of coordinate, and then that's where we go from here. So I think the topic of discussion today, which is a great topic to start 2024, is problems scale 2. So go into a little bit more detail about what that means, what it looks like, and then ultimately how can we overcome it?
Well, Matthew said, "What are we talking about today?" Right? That's how we start this. So it's just what are we talking about today?
Yep, every single time.
And it started from a phone call that I just took, and so I got this notepad, and in the notepad was all the persons what they want to get accomplished. And it's interesting because I saw I want to be 40, 50 locations, and I want to be right. So it's this idea of I want to be a gigantic, quasi DSO group dental practice, however you want to look at it. And so then, but we looked at this problem, and I'll get into profit perfect cost. But when I looked at the problem, I ultimately said, you're going to, if you try to expand at this moment, you're going to expand with the same problem you have at location 1, and you haven't fixed location 1. One of the things I said to him, I said, look, I jumped out on the phone call and I just said, listen, it's okay if I just jump in. I'm here to be your coach. I'm not here to be your best friend. And I'm going to tell you that a lot of the mistakes you're making are 101 mistakes. These are rookie moves. And it's interesting how many, and you've seen it too, how many larger practices make rookie mistakes.
Yep.
And look, the science of the business, of any business, is black and white. It's so simple. If you do X, you get Y result. It's not even, it's so simple if you just do it, right? Now, there's the art of the business, and the art of the business is a little bit more difficult. That's your gray area. That's how you retain team members. That's how you grow your brand in the marketplace. There's a lot of, and I could keep going on for a long time. But that is your art, which is much more difficult. Steve Jobs is amazing at the art of the business, right? Yep. So you can be great at the art of the business, and then you can be great at the science. Now, first thing is, and this phone call was science. So this podcast is featuring the science of the business.
Science.
So here's the dilemma. So I'll kind of just throw it out there. So the doctor says, I want more profit. Who doesn't want more profit? I think we all want more profit. So I get this 12-page dissertation on the goals and pulling back in profit and those things. And I looked at it right away and I said, well, the problem is you're not open enough. And so I called somebody else who had some kind of familiarity with this person, and we were talking through it. And they said, oh my gosh, they have more patients to know what to do with, but they are not open on Fridays, and they have limited hours during the week. And when I say limited, I mean the regular hours. And so I went back to them and I told them 2 things. I said, well, first of all, actually, I told them a few things, and I'll kind of go over those on this podcast. And you need to go check mark and say, am I doing these or not doing these? Well, the first one thing was, I said, if you open capacity, people want to come. They want to come to your business. It's like having a restaurant that's open Monday through Friday and never opening on Saturday. Well, people want to come. Well, when we focus on profit per fixed cost, and if you're listening to this podcast, and as long as you're not driving, write down profit per fixed cost.
Yeah.
And I said, you already have fixed costs in this facility. When I started a dental practice decades ago, all of a sudden I get this, well, we're not going to work on Fridays. And I was like, what do you mean we're not working on Fridays? Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. And so the very first thing I said is, fine, I'll find an orthodontist or somebody and I found an orthodontist who would come in on Fridays and work so we can make money on Fridays, because I knew my fixed costs were, they were fixed, right? They were fixed cost. And so I said, well, I'm going to make as much money as possible, i.e. profit per fixed cost. And so you would think that all businesses, first of all, especially on scale, would know that you would maximize your revenue, which is a leading indicator of profitability, per fixed cost. And yet they don't. I mean, we see it all the time, right, Matthew? I mean, we see doctors' offices that are 3, 4, 5 locations, and yet still don't understand the basics of capacity.
Constant phone calls that come in from doctors that are multi-location. They're like, I'm looking to buy another location. I said, tell me more about the other locations you have. Oh, they're open, 2 days a week, 1 day a week, 3 days a week. And I just asked them, why? Well, number one, why are you chasing it? Why are you chasing another practice? Like, what are you not getting accomplished out of the 3 practices you have now?
Sure.
And number 2, tell me about the operations of that business. Like, are they open 5 days a week? Are they open 4 days a week? Why haven't you even explored that aspect? And there's always, I think you said it best, and I think, who was it? Tony Robbins said, people don't lack resources, they lack resourcefulness.
Yeah.
And last year, every single person that called in always had problems with profit too. And if you ask them a very basic question, and its nature is, hey, kids, tell me about your hours. 9 out of 10, they're open Monday to Thursday. And I'm like, okay, if you just open up that Friday, and is it as simple as opening a Friday? Yes. I think sometimes in business, you have to go back to the fundamental purposes and say, all right, fundamentally, how do I get the organization to move forward? Open a Friday. It's simple steps.
Or open up longer hours, or open up a Saturday, or open up. I was telling someone recently, I said, actually, I told the story. I said, listen, I had a young lady years ago, probably a decade ago. I was consulting. I get a phone call from a client. Said, hey, listen, I've got a best friend. She's in this practice. She's not making any money.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, let me get on the phone with her. And she wasn't even a client. I don't think she even paid me $1. I think I just did it to help her. And somebody had put her in this practice. It was a horrible practice. I mean, it was just, I can't believe that the broker should be in jail, and so should everybody else that was involved in the transaction. It was that bad. Yeah. The girl was losing $20,000 a month day one. Like it was criminal. Yeah. And so I looked at her and I said, what are you willing to do to become profitable? Because I said, what are your goals? And she said, I just want to be in the black. And so I said, okay, are you willing to work Sundays? And she was like, huh? And I said, yeah, or you want to work Sundays? Now, she was in an area, you need to know the background, that it was higher, it was an older population. So I said, hey, listen, there's a lot of older population. To them, Sunday and Monday are the same day. Yeah. And so if you open up on Sunday, you're going to have a lot of people that show up. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, she did. And she made tons of money on that Sunday. She was booked out forever. She took that money. She invested in marketing. She got more patients. And eventually she opened up, she made, not only did she make it in the black, but she ended up becoming Businesswoman of the Year. Yeah. I cannot tell you, listening right now, how many doctors do not maximize their current facility. When I say maximize, they're not even close to maximizing their current facility. They're so excited about growing that they haven't figured out to maximize their current location, or even maybe if you get a 90% efficiency, maybe then you say, hey, look, or even have a metric of 82% efficiency, and then you move on to the next location. But they don't even get close. And so what ends up happening is they're kicking the can, but they're scaling the same problem. They don't know how to ultimately maximize profit per fixed cost. And because they don't know how to do that, now there's a lot of other ways. I'll talk about another one in a second. But because they don't know how to do that, then ultimately they scale the same dang problem, which is, I don't know how to maximize this facility. And so the first one is, I just said, now this was just, it just happened this way. Now you might be listening to this and saying, well, I've maximized my capacity. And that might be true. I'll give you some other ones in a second. But understand that how many, we had a doctor, I remember you and I, we had someone come to us like 3 years ago or something. They had like 5 doctors and they were closed on Friday. Like I've never seen such a poor business decision.
The questionnaire came across and I was like, is this right?
I mean, right? I was like, we're all...
And we can't figure out how to grow here. I'm like...
you're kind of...
and they were like, they all want to make $1 million. That's
right.
Okay.
Well, and then you're closed at 4:30, you see the last patient, or 4 o'clock, you see the last patient. And I'm like, and so it doesn't even make sense. Like, you've got to maximize your facility. the more you maximize your facility, when we look at profit per fixed cost, you would increase the average revenue per patient, right? So that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Or you would increase ultimately the capacity. Like you want to see as many people as possible in that current location. And so if you're not seeing the most people in that current location as possible, well, then that's an absurd thing. Like you're missing out, right? So now here's the thing. Now people say, well, Eric, I don't want to spend more money in marketing. Well, here's the thing. You don't have to. If you they're already waiting. I said, if you lined up these patients out the door, I guarantee you, if you saw them standing outside on the sidewalk, you'd get a doctor in there pretty quick. They're already on the sidewalk, and yet you're not getting them in the door. And so it's like you've got to figure out now. Here's
They're
the thing.
booked out 6 weeks. Like
I told this doctor, I said, look, you don't have to work Fridays.
Yeah.
Have someone else work Fridays. Get an associate. I said, heck, even Saturdays, the most aggressive associates are ones that want to work Saturdays. They usually have no families. They want to make the money. They want to pay off their student loans. They're hungry. I said, they'll work a Saturday. I said, there's no reason. Now, you might have to work a deposit or some other things on Saturdays because Saturdays are kind of a tricky day. But the whole point is that you need to first figure out, are you maximizing your capacity in your location? If you're not doing that, you don't need to scale yet. You're scaling you haven't figured out 101 science of the business. So you haven't got your systems and processes down, and yet here you want to scale your poor decisions, and you want to do them on scale. Now I haven't gotten into revenue cycle management, which I'm going to talk about that in a second, but I want to talk about the fact of just that one piece. Like if you just take that piece and realize you're I said to this doctor, I said, listen, this is my first phone call with this doctor. I said, if you just do what I just told you to do on this phone call, I just paid for myself for like the next year, actually way more than that. If you just do what I do tell you to do on this one phone call. Sometimes this stuff is so easy, but you get now I did tell them this. If your team pushes back, and they will, by the way.
They're going to.
They're going to. I said, it's the first thing to know that when you change your core way of doing things, people are going to push back. And I was like, you just need to realize that this is your family and this is your job is to steward this company and steward the goals of it and steward for your community. I said, so you don't stop doing what you're supposed to be doing right now. Like you're going to have to push through and they're going to fight you.
They might sabotage too. Remember, we used to do those phone calls. We did at our foundation workshops. This was probably 6 years ago. We used to call the practices just to see kind of how they answered the phones. Because a lot of times people would say, I'm open on Fridays or I'm open on Saturdays, but for whatever reason, we can't fill up those days. And we called that one practice and the lady actually referred us down the street to avoid having to work on that Friday. And you and I were like, what? And then we had to show that person. That was like, this is what happens if you do this. Like, you're going to have sabotage, you're going to have pushback, but you have to be able to monitor those things. And I think logically, when you look at it, when someone tries to go to a second location, okay, so what are they trying to do? Number one, they're trying to grow. Number two, they're trying to get their time back by opening a second location. And part of the reason why they won't open on that Friday is because they don't want their team, they don't have to go to their team and say, hey, we're working on Friday. So opening a second location to get your time back and not stress out the team, even though the team is probably, the office manager might have to go between the two. So she's going to have to work twice as much instead of just opening another day. And you're actively putting another business on your shoulder, so your time is not going to come back when all you had to do was open up that Friday. Would it cost you no less time, would have grown your income, and your team wouldn't have to work as hard with the second location. I think if you break it down, it's like, all right, logically, what should we do here?
Well, and that's the thing is if you look at the profit, now this is if you look at when I say profit for a moment, I mean free cash flow. Okay. You probably would make more free cash flow if you had just maximized your current facility. You wouldn't have taken on all this debt, all the additional stress. You wouldn't have scaled problems. Now, I'm a big fan of multiple locations. Don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to say, and by the way, when you're expanding multiple locations, one of the things you can do is, we get this question often, which is, should I put my second location closer or further away?
No.
So if I go farther away, then I say, well, okay, you would do that so you can get another market, right? So you're trying to capture. Farther away means another market. You're trying to capture a market you don't have right now. Closer means you open capacity, which means your current location is completely maxed out. And so what you do is you open up a location within 5 miles or so of your current location, and now you have more capacity to see. Now there might be a real estate play in there as well, but you have more capacity to see. Now, because some people, that new location's on the way, and so they're going to stop there, and now you've opened up capacity again. So we have to get this part down, which is, and people don't want to do this because what ends up happening is they want to feel like they're the superhero, and they're like, look at me, I have 3 locations. I'm like, yeah, you're making less money though than if you just had one and you maximized it. And this is where ego takes over. It's like what is your ego telling you versus what is business telling you to do? Look, I would rather have one location making twice the amount of profit than two locations, and you won't even make twice the amount. You're not going to make twice the amount of profit, and that's the mistake. And we see this over and over, is because people think, well, I'll just get a second location and I'll make twice as much money. Listen to me on this podcast. Opening up a second location does not mean you'll make twice as amount of money. In fact, very rarely does somebody take their first location and scale it to the second location and make twice as much money. In fact, very rarely does that happen. Now, there's a lot of reasons outside the scope of this podcast, but I'm going to tell you that's very rare. If you don't, now there is another side of this, which some of you are so damn scared to get it to a second location. No matter how perfect everything is, you're like, well, yeah. So Eric's giving me the reasons why not to go to another location because I'm so scared. Now Now you might need to get off the, get going. Okay. You might have, you're not going to get 100% efficiency out of anything. You always have some portion of patients that don't show. You'll always have some, you always have difficulties that tend to, and there's some things that are just going to happen. But the idea of expanding when you haven't even figured out how to maximize your current location, when you haven't figured out revenue cycle management, when you haven't figured out how to keep and retain team members at scale, these types of things, if you haven't figured this out, you're just going to scale your problems. You're going to scale. Now all of a sudden you have 2 locations where you're losing team members but don't know how to get them in a repeatable way. You have 2 locations where you're losing patients but do not know how to retain them in a repeatable way. You have 2 locations where you don't know how to maximize marketing and marketing efficiency and acquisition costs. You have 2 locations where you don't understand capacity and how to maximize capacity. And you have 2 locations where you don't understand the profit per fixed cost and how to maximize that. You have 2 locations where you have accounts receivable you haven't been able to maximize. And I can keep going on and on and on. And so it's like, so now all of a sudden you go, and now the reason, here's the crazy part, the reason why you did it was so that you can sit in a dental convention and look at your peer and say, I've got 2 locations. Look at how bright I am. It's just absurd. And I'm not trying to beat up on people, but I'm not here to be your best friend either. I'm telling you that a lot of people are doing this because they think it makes them look better. But you want to forget looking better. Be a better business person. Make more money. Be more profitable. You want to be a great business owner? Learn how to scale profitably. Don't just scale profitably. And go, well, the banks will lend me money. You're a dentist. The banks will lend you money. The only way banks don't lend you money in dental is if you're really bad at it. Okay? So just because the bank will lend you money doesn't mean that you should take it. You're probably not ready. And so people are making crazy mistakes before they even figure out how to maximize one location. And it's absurd.
And they don't know. So I had a conversation with a doctor the other day. He called in, saw all of our stuff online, and ultimately he's got a very successful location in the Houston area. So he's got a very successful location. He's in a really nice area of Houston. And ultimately he's like, all right, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm in a great location right now, and I don't know what to do. He's like, all my buddies have sold off to DSOs, and I'm thinking about getting a second location. And I said, all right, so why do you even want a second location? He couldn't give me a straight answer. He's like, I don't really I was like, so what are you not getting from your first location now that you think you're going to get from this second location? And he couldn't give me a straight answer, but he wanted to talk about acquisition strategy and if he and he doesn't want to go de novo and all of these things. I was like, so why do you want to do this? Like, you just told me for the last 30 years, you've had a successful practice, and by the numbers, it was a successful practice. He was open like every other Friday or something, but it wasn't maximized. You could tell on paper that. And I was like, so you're trying to create something else, tell your team that's been doing it the same way for 30 years that you want to go open up this other business, and you're not going to be able to articulate to them why you're doing it. I was like, you're going to struggle, you're going to fail, and all your friends that said opening a second location was a terrible mistake, I shouldn't have done that, is because you didn't figure out why you're going to do it, and number 2, how you can scale it. And he just was dumbfounded by that concept of all right, I need to figure out why I even want to do this. If I'm getting everything I want now, I'm making the income I want, my team's happy, then why are you doing it outside of just an ego trip to just kind of open up more and more locations? And that's just one example. People call in all the time and they have 3-4 locations and they're trying to figure out, all right, so should I buy this next location? Should I use debt to do this? And I ask them simply, what are you chasing? They have no idea. I'm like, okay, so Why not go back to your first few locations and figure out how we can maximize those? Are they truly maximized? Because whatever you're trying to accomplish with all of these other locations, if you just focus in on these 3, you would be in good shape. Because what you're doing right now is the concept of this podcast is you're scaling problems. All you're going to do is open a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 location, and all you're doing is adding more stress to your place. I've never had a doctor that has 5 locations call in and say, I got all the free time in the freaking world. My life is good. I'm making as much money as I want. I've never had that phone call where like by adding these locations, I got my time back. It was less stressful and I made more money. They're all like, what do I do?
Well, and the truth is you can't get there though. I don't want you to think you can't get there, because you can, but you can't scale the problems and get there.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out how to do this right. And so what we rarely or never see is somebody coming to us that has actually scaled things correctly. And the reason why is ego. You've got to figure out, like, if I gave you a book and said, like, so for instance, if you had a binder and you were to teach someone else, so let's just say you had an associate come in and you were to teach your systems to an associate, and you say, okay, this is how you ultimately maximize capacity. Could you do that? Could you actually explain to them how to get to a practice to 90% efficiency? Or would you stumble over your words? Or would you not be able to put into writing? Would you, if you can't put it into writing and you can't educate that and you don't know how to really, if you've never done it, then you can't scale it. Then you can't teach somebody else. If you can't, what we call unconscious competency, if you cannot get to, so if you can't do it without, if you have to think through every step, if you literally don't have it down to where it just rolls off your tongue because you know it, then you're not ready. You don't know how to do it yet. If you don't know your profit margin like that, if you can't scale and profit, and this is what's happening too. So people are adding, what they're doing is they're growing to multiple locations. As they grow to multiple locations, because they're led by associates, the profitability is, let's call it 15%. 8%, 15%, 12%, somewhere in there, because of the fact now, in that moment, revenue cycle management now becomes crucial.
Yeah.
Because if you do not have revenue cycle management, and I'm talking about marketing, call conversion, case acceptance, AR, if you don't have all this stuff down to a like to the T, you're going to lose money. Watch, I'm telling you're going to lose money. And you're going to say, like, why is the second location at 6% profitability? You're going to take profitability from location 1, you're going to convert it to location number 2, and so your overall effective profit margin is going down. And now you've got a darn mess because you never figured out how to maximize profit per location. You don't have revenue cycle management down. You get to the second location, and now all of a sudden you start losing money. And you're stressed, you have bad systems, you're losing money, and then some of you, crazy as it is, at this point decide you're going to take on a third location. And you go, well, now I'm going to take on 3 locations, and I cannot tell you how many times somebody has come to us and they're like, I have 3 locations. I'm like, yeah, you're losing, $15,000 a month. Congratulations. So it's this idea of like we're in this dental economy where for some reason the number of locations, not profit, is guiding people's success criteria. Profit is what determines whether you're a successful business owner, not revenue. If you walk into a room and go, I do 10 million in revenue, who gives a damn? How much profit do you make in the $10 million? Because great business owners know how to, matter of fact, if a DSO or private equity buys, what are they doing? Multiples of EBITDA, multiples of profit. Profit is what makes you a great business owner, not revenue. Now,
and I would argue that most of those people don't have any cash either.
Very good point. They don't. Well, they've never looked at a cash flow statement. So they don't understand even what.
So they might come to you and say, "Oh yeah, my EBITDA is this, blah 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 blah," and you look and you break out the numbers. You're like, "Okay, well, you don't have any cash. You don't make any money. Like you might have a good profit margin, but."
I remember years ago I had this guy. He was doing $5 million in revenue, and I look at his bank account. He's got $4,000 in it. Matthew, I about lost my mind. I was like, well, you have $4,000 on a $5 million dental practice?
I don't know where the money goes.
I was like, where do you sleep at night? Like, I don't even understand. So understand, like, you have to have cash reserves. You have to have savings. You have to have maximize profitability. You need to understand revenue cycle management. You've got to get this stuff down. If you don't, you're a pretender. You're a pretender. And yes, listen, this is the Dental Wealth Podcast. Listen, go tell all your friends how successful you are. But see, the thing is that are you really successful? And what's the determinant of success? You think it's top line revenue. Look, it's fair to say that top line revenue obviously is a predictive indicator of profitability. I mean, the more actually top line revenue, it's typically should be a leading indicator of profitability. But if you don't understand how to maximize profitability, now some of you listening to this are thinking, well, I'll just cut all my costs. Okay, that's not how you maximize profitability.
No.
That's how you actually over long term lower your profitability. So if you think that's the case, you're probably in scarcity mindset, will never get there anyhow. You have to be able to grow a practice, maximize it, maximize a revenue cycle, maximize systems, maximize profitability over time, and then scale that. When you get your business to where you're at 90% of its overall efficiency, when you're converting 80% of your phone calls, when your case acceptance rate is 75% or higher, when you're collecting 100%, 98%, when you're hitting all these metrics, and not even just collecting it, but collecting it in a shorter period of time, because cash conversion means that you can collect it in a shorter amount of time. And I'll explain this one concept. This is a freebie for anyone listening. So I want you to think about, this is a little trick for you. We were talking about capacity, but this is a little trick for you, okay? So let's just say you want to grow your business tremendously in 2024. So think about this. So let's assume your AR is $150,000 at any given point. So at any point, now 90 days plus doesn't count. So anything in your accounts receivable that says 90 days plus it doesn't count. So you just get rid of that. Okay, 7% chance you'll ever see it. So it doesn't count. So let's assume that at any given point you have $150,000 in your accounts receivable. But let's just say, now typically that happens because maybe your average collection date is 43 days. So it's taking 43 days on average to collect a claim. But let's just say that we can move that from 43 days to 39 days, 36 days, whatever the number is. Then if that was the case, let's just say that you would go from $150,000 in revenue that's sitting in AR to $130,000. Okay. So it's $20,000 more in your checking account per month without producing $1 more. You didn't do anything. All you did was get aggressive on collections. So now you have $20,000 more in your checking account. You say, well, okay, that's $20,000. What does that mean? Well, let's play some scenario out. So we have $20,000 per month on average more in your bank account. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that to capture unrealized revenue. Assuming I have capacity, I got my iPhone
trusty
here.
calculator.
So let's do some little math here. So I have $20,000. And let's say that I have the average acquisition of a general practitioner, and that's $117. So let's divide that by 117. That would give me 171 patients per month additionally. Okay. 20,000, 171 patients. Well, there's a correlation between revenue and new patients, and it's about $1,700. There's a direct correlation. So that means 171 times 1,700 equals $290,000 of additional revenue. Now, you would have to have capacity to see that revenue, right? You would have to have the ability to convert those patients into dollars. Now maybe your rate's lower, but my whole point of this is to say, if you added 171 patients, but take half of that, maybe it's 10,000, maybe it's 5,000, you could literally market more at no extra cost in the fact that the money's just sitting out there. In a sense, that what's in your AR is a free loan, right? It's a free loan to the insurance companies. It's a free loan to the patients. It's a free loan. So if you were able to take that and convert to a lower cash conversion in amount of days, you could have more money in your checking account. By having that money in your checking account, you could then invest it, for instance, into marketing. And then you would have enough patients coming in, and assuming you have the capacity to see those patients and you can convert them and then convert the treatment, you would grow your practice in 2024 just by taking your AR and reducing the number of days it's outstanding. You would grow your practice and profitability significantly in 2024, and you could scale that and scale that. And by the way, if you had 171 patients, okay,
Yeah.
not to say that you're going to spend all 20,000 marketing, because that's probably a big facility, but if you could see very quickly that you could maximize your facility
Easily.
and get to 90% or so efficiency, as long as you were able to get patients to show. And that's another problem in the cash, in the revenue cycle. But you could very quickly grow your practice at a crazy rate.
Yeah.
Just by getting control of your operations, getting control of your systems, understanding capacity, understanding marketing, because you would have to understand marketing, you'd have to understand capacity, you would have to understand AR, you would have to be able to get patients to show up. So you have to get control of your capacity and your revenue cycle. But if you did that, then we're not even in the art of the business.
Yeah.
Gosh, what you could do, and then get that down and then scale. Now, someone has to teach you how to do all the specific steps of this. But could you imagine in 2024 what you could do to your business if you learn how to maximize your revenue cycle and you learn how to maximize your capacity?
Yeah. And then where to put the money. You got to be able to invest it too. So I think a lot of times people, they'll free up cash and then they'll hold on to it as like it's sacred. It's like, I just got this, I don't want to get rid of it. And it's like we have to tell people, like, this is where you're going to put the money. If you don't have guidance on that, then you're going to be on a tight rope moving forward, because any mistake you have, you're going to feel the cash flow crunch. And I think, like you said, having like almost like a grading system for yourself. Revenue cycle management is how you get cash in the door. So if you're not confident in your revenue cycle management, and it's at not like, grade your scale out, like self out. Before you purchase that next location, I need to be at a 90 percentile. I'm going to be 90% confident in my revenue cycle management. I need to be 90% confident in my onboarding and recruitment of new team members. I need to be 90% confident in how the operations of our organization is ran. You need to start grading yourself out before you make this decision. And, you have to be willing to invest too. I can't tell you how many times someone goes from one location that's doing, they max it out at 3 million or whatever it is, and they open up this second location and they refuse to hire and a COO or an operations director that can actually do it, and they just get Susie, who's ran that one, to open up the second location, and they don't give her any resources. Like, if you're not willing to invest the capital that you gain if you fix your average revenue into team members or into marketing or into increasing capacity, then what's the point? You're just going to be in the same position you are now. And we see it happen over and over and over again. There's so many phone calls that come into Tower Leadership that I have this same conversation. And I'm like, if you would just get this one concept, it would answer all of your questions.
And here's the success sometimes is your biggest enemy, because what happens is you grew to 2 or 3 locations. So you go, I got this stuff down. I'll guarantee you don't.
Yeah.
And I'll guarantee if I got on the phone call with you, I would see the holes everywhere. And so here's the message of this podcast. Problems scale too. Greatness scales, right? If you learn how to scale the good things you do in patient care, and maybe it's, hiring the right team members or whatever it is that you've got down, those things should scale. But so do the problems. And if you don't get this down, you will scale disaster. You will scale inefficiencies. And the first location, you might be one of the biggest producers, so you're artificially, in a sense, inflating profitability in the fact that you're the producer. But on scale, you're going to lose money. So you got to figure this stuff out. You got to figure out all the things I've talked about on this podcast. Grade yourself. And if you need help, you need to reach out for help, whether it's Tower or somebody else. You need to reach out for help, because you're gonna make a disaster, and then you're gonna wake up in the middle of the night. I mean, being an entrepreneur is hard enough.
Yeah.
I mean, don't make it harder on yourself. I mean, good God.
I can only imagine the amount, like if we sat down 1,000 dental practices right now and we said, what is your 2024 goals? I'd be willing to bet at least 30% add another location on it. Maybe more than that. Probably 50%. 1,000 dentists, 50% of them probably said add a second location. And if you were to ask those 50%, so if you ask those 500 practices why they want that, they're going to have no idea. And if you ask them if that first one is maximized, you're probably going to get most of them say yes. But if you actually look at it and you say, all right, can you scale this? They're going to say no.
And then the other part of it is really simple, where you just say to somebody, because like, what if you just doubled profitability at your first location? Or what if you increased profitability 7%, percentage points at your first location. How much more would that, because you have to take on debt with the other location, because you have to take on all the, there's a lot of other things that affect free cash flow. You'd probably find out that without taking on that second location, you would increase profit. If you just focus on profitability as a metric, you would probably make more money just by staying at one location. Now, we're not saying don't scale to the second location. That's not what we're saying. If you got that, that's not what we said. We said to figure out first how to maximize profitability of location one, build the systems around it,
Yeah.
then go to location number two.
Yep.
Then you scale your great systems. If not, you're going to scale mistakes. And that's the message for today. Don't scale mistakes.
I feel like being back in the studio caught us on fire. I like it. I like it. I like it.
We're on fire today, Matthew.
We are.
2024. It's going to be a great year.
We're excited. We
Great
got
things.
a lot of good things coming to our listeners, to our clients, to Marketplace. We're heavily investing into helping you guys. I mean, I think that's, the name of the game for us this year is, how do we make sure the clients are getting the results they want? There's a lot of moving parts, and we have to be always in tune with the marketplace. The reasons we do this podcast for new listeners is we want to help you. We want to give you resources, give you guidance along the way. It's going to be a busy 2024, which is awesome. I like being busy. Standing still, sitting still is not what we like to do. We're quick starts. We're active people. So as always, if you're new to the podcast, subscribe, like, share. How we get the message out, how we get it in more people's hands, how we have more impact is by liking, sharing, subscribing. So as always, thank you, Mr. Morin.
Thank you, Matthew.
Being in the studio, back in the studio, and we will see you guys next time.